Hey, seventh grade STEM. This is Dr. Cribbs. I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about some of the observations I did this week. You might have noticed me coming into classrooms, and I wanted to just kind of give an idea of why I'm doing that and give you some of the ideas and thoughts I had while I was in the rooms. And I think I'm going to start doing this as like a weekly video like this, just because you all's schedules are stretched so thin that sometimes it's hard for me to get 7 or 8 minutes with you. So I'm going to make a video and you can watch it at a time convenient to yourself. But I'm certainly available to discuss anything we talk about. And I think it might be a good maybe agenda item on Mondays to maybe talk about some of the observation stuff. Anyway, why am I coming in the classrooms? Well, one, I like coming in the classrooms, I like to see what's going on. But also some of the feedback we got from the Department of Ed, and y'all have heard me talk about this already. They said that we need to have longer, like more year-long focuses and year-long projects, but focus more on our day-to-day one-to-one connections between classes. And it's harder for y'all to have an idea of what's going on in every class. It's easier for me to get in every class and kind of brainstorm and think of those ideas. So that's one thing I'm doing. One thing I want to say that I'm realizing as I go into classrooms is it's really, really awesome if we're learning something in one class and it perfectly lines up to what we're learning in another class. Kind of like when y'all were reading G. Lee's autobiography and they were also learning about the Cultural Revolution and social studies. I mean, that was awesome. That was perfect. Lined up perfectly. We're not always going to have that though. And my thought is, we don't have to connect to something we're both learning at that moment. Maybe it's something you've already learned. Maybe it's something another teacher is teaching and you're like, hey, our kids have already learned this, say in science. You could mention this standard or you can use what I did in this standard while you're teaching. It doesn't have to be synchronous. I'll give a good example. In sixth grade learns unit rates in math, but they also learn about calculating standard of living and per capita GDP and all these economic concepts in social studies. Now, those don't line up the same week or even month, but when social studies teaches those standards, and Mr. Thomas, you have those standards too, when they teach those, they can be using the format and language of calculating unit rates that they use in math. Now, did they happen in the same unit? Did they even happen in the same grading period? No. But that is still a very valid interdisciplinary connection. Another thing I've noticed is opportunities to not just connect to each other, but ways we can connect what we're learning to our overall theme for the year. And I don't know how y'all feel about this, but it almost seems like the school garden is becoming our seventh grade theme. It doesn't have to. I just know it's like taking on a life of its own. When I was collecting that organic material last week from the cafeteria, everybody was into it. All the kids from every team were asking about it. The lunch ladies were excited about it, asking about it. The custodians were asking about it. All the other teachers were asking about it. Everybody was jazzed up about what we were going to do with this stuff. And I'm like, we just need rotten stuff for a garden. And they were like, what are you going to grow? What are you going to do with it? I had an administrator come to me and say, I found like 10 bags of potting soil. Can y'all use that? And then somebody was like, can we have all these planter boxes between 6th and 7th grade? Can we use those? I mean, it's like taking on a life of its own. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe that's our theme. Maybe that's our theme for 7th grade. We already have this big trash to treasure unit. Maybe the school gardening is how we connect our contents together more easily. And maybe that's how we get our community partners. I don't know. We can talk about it Monday. Another thing I want to see is more group learning. And that's one thing I'm looking for and identifying ways we can do that. I know y'all's rooms are small, but like the kind of thing they want to see is like desks grouped together. So instead of turning and talking to a partner, like group work kind of leads what we do. For example, when I was in there this week, I saw a bunch of great class discussions and the kids were into it. But some of those discussions, the teacher's talking to one person and there's like all these little other conversations springing up around the room and they kind of distracted from the group discussion. But if you listen to those kids, they were talking about the topic at hand. So those are great times if we're in groups. You can give a class discussion and give some talking points and let the groups discuss with each other. And then you regroup and kind of talk about it as a whole. That gives a chance for more kids to share and talk about stuff. Another great opportunity for the group learning is when you have a STEM journal entry, let them kind of talk about it with each other and then work on them and then share them with each other, just in a small group, 3 or 4 students. It makes that STEM journal more visible and lets them share their thinking with each other. And again, that's one of our 21st century skills is collaborate. We've got to find more opportunities. We've got to find more opportunities for the kids to be working in groups. All right, so some classroom specific ideas I had. I went in Mr. Cleveland's class. Y'all were talking about artificial versus natural selection, and you used dog breeding as your example, how all dogs, even Chihuahuas up to Great Danes, are bred from the wolf. Really, the kids were really into that topic. It was super interesting. I thought another way you could connect that, if we had a school garden, you could talk about cross-pollination and like designer fruits and vegetables. These are examples of artificial selection that we use in gardening. You could connect that right to the school garden. I got at Publix the other day, I got something called a grapple. I don't know if you've ever had a grapple, but it's an apple that smells like a grape. Not in any way as God ever intended that fruit to taste or smell, but it was delicious. And that's a great example of artificial selection. So we could talk about that. You could connect that content to a school garden. Ms. Shackelford, y'all were doing I really liked your group activity of the speed dating or the each one teach one. That was really good. Another way you could do that is after they were finished, maybe if they sat in groups after they did their speed dating, they could return to their groups and kind of compare some of their answers. And that might give you more time when you're going over the answers. They've already kind of done that in a smaller group and can keep going. Another thing, I know y'all are learning about square roots. I know you were estimating square roots, but I just couldn't help but connect when I was in Mr. Cleveland's room. If you look at a Punnett square, however many traits you're talking about, not the phenotype, but the genotype, say you've got 4 traits you're looking at, well, the number of possible combinations is that number squared. So like if you're looking at four possible traits, you're gonna have 16 possible outcomes. Same way, and that goes up from there. If you're talking about 10 different traits, the number of possible combinations there is 100. So I just thought that was a neat connection. When we're talking about Punnett squares, we're basically just squaring our number of the number of traits we're looking at. I thought that was a neat connection. Might be something cool to show them. Ms. Jones, you were testing that day, so I left you be. And Mr. Thomas, in social studies, you were talking about comparing and contrasting Buddhism, Hinduism, Shintoism, Confucianism. One, I thought that topic was really just begging for a graphic organizer, and you may have used one. But then that got me thinking, well, you could compare and contrast them, but you could also look at what are all those different faiths, beliefs on gardening. All of them have very strong connections to gardening and horticulture. For example, in Buddhist gardens, a Buddhist garden seeks for peace, serenity, respect for living things. You could have kids examine like different examples of a Buddhist garden and how does their gardening philosophy represent their beliefs. Hinduism, have huge respect for all living things. Most of them are vegetarians. So you could connect their, what is their beliefs on gardening? Well, most of human sustenance should come from gardening and not wasting and respecting living things. You could make the argument that us composting the bananas and grapes that nobody eats, we're respecting those living things by giving them back to the earth for a purpose and not just throwing them in the trash. Shintoism, if you've ever been to a Shinto shrine, Shinto shrines are all about seeking balance between the structures of the shrine and the nature surrounding it. So it's a way of respecting all the vegetation in the area. And even Confucianism is what many Chinese gardens grew out of that belief system. And if you've ever seen a Chinese garden, they have like water, stone structures, plants, and they also have like the lotus ponds, sometimes a koi fish. Anyway, all these 4 faiths all connect to gardening also. And I just thought that was just that's a cool way of possibly connecting what you're learning to an overall theme like gardening. Now, I'm not saying y'all have to do all these. What I'm trying to do is kind of trying to illustrate ways we can look at what we're doing in class and how can we connect them to each other and how can we connect them to an overall theme? And I think there are so many ways you guys could come up with. Here's my suggestion. I suggest on Mondays, we make an agenda item where we talk about what we're learning in each class. So, and not just a general topic. I mean, hey, these are my learning targets for the week. And as somebody reads their learning targets, we can think of ways, how can we connect that back to our theme of gardening, if we choose gardening? And how can we relate that to things we've learned in our class previously or now? Like have just maybe a few minute conversation for each content area and say, what connections can we make here? What connections? And we'll have a whole room of brilliant, intelligent people in that room where we can come up with these ideas. I think that'd be a great thing to start Monday. I can even try to guide the conversation the first few times. But anyway, I'd love to hear what you all think. Sorry if this video went a little too long, but I'd love to talk about it again with you all on Monday, or you can certainly talk to me about it before then if you like. All right, y'all have a great Thursday.